The power of the enemy. The following account comes to us from 19th century Russia. Although some distance away in time and space, it offers some striking parallels to our own day when we see materialism giving way before a growing fascination with spiritism. How will it end? Tragically, if the world continues to ignore the lessons which history has so generously provided. Back in my early childhood, I heard frightful tales of terrifying manifestations of the powers of unclean spirits over people, who cooperated through willfully serving sin and the devil. My memory, even to this day when I am approaching the sunset of my life, has preserved in its treasure house recollections of those impressions gathered under the influence of my old nanny and those other elderly women to whom even relatively recently the doors to the nurseries of houses belonging to the old Russian nobility stood open. They had not yet lost their ties with the vast crowd of simple people, with its simple, guileless and childlike faith. What mysteries of the unseen world were revealed to this faith? How much in this foreign world was accessible to the eyes of these children? Who among us, Orthodox Russian people, whatever his profession or rank, was not acquainted in his formative years with that mysterious unseen world, full of wonders and also fearful, where the unclean powers operated and worked on the destruction of the Orthodox soul? Who does not remember all these wood demons, water sprites, house spirits, a fantasy according to the wisdom of this world, and their agents and slaves from the human race, sorcerers, witches, and their unclean colleagues of the same ilk? What child's heart did not tremble listening to these stories in the dim light of an autumn or winter evening illuminated by the flickering of a vigil lamp? And how it believed them! How it beat from a dread perturbation! It seemed it could burst were it not for old Nanny's calm and triumphant assurance that her charge had nothing to fear, for the powers of evil could not touch him because he was protected by his guardian angel, his pure child soul and its prayers, and finally by all that grace present in the form of theophany water, athonite incense, holy oil from the relics of God-pleasers, and various other holy things, in her icon corner which flickered with the flame of her perpetually burning vigil lamp. Yes, and what child soul, sensitive to every truth, would not believe these stories, when Nanny herself and her interlocutors were even more convinced of them than her young listener? Some of them were half dead with fright, having witnessed that which they related. And I too believed them with all my child's heart, until the spirit of the times, the spirit of skepticism, all but suffocated any faith in that which smart people called old wives' tales. I had to submit to the directive of the smart people, and for a long time, in place of my childhood belief in the spiritual world, to set up another faith in other gods and in other idols before whom the smart people themselves bowed down. But what a struggle in my soul I had to pay for my disenchantments and the acquisition of that desired truth, which was so simply given and so simply accepted by the ordinary folk in the Orthodox Church through her sacred scripture, tradition, and lives of God-pleasers. My soul stubbornly refused to be satisfied with materialism alone, which tried to substitute for the life of the spirit the liberation movement or the great reforms of the 60s and the ensuing years. During this intense struggle in my soul, I became aware of a sharp discord. At the same time that the entire spiritual world was subject to scorn and derision, and later even denial, Smart people who stood at the head of the social movement, by some totally illogical jump, leapt from transmutation of species and cells and protoplasmas into that very sphere which they had ostracized. Materialism extended a hand to spiritism, and smart people considered it possible to join these unjoinables into a general kasha. They ate this kasha, licked their spoons and said, "Thanks." What powerful unseen hand threw the very cream of educated society, even professors, towards spinning tables and saucers, and turned yesterday's despairing materialists into today's materializers of unseen spirits. And now, for the first time since my evening sessions with Nanny, I heard from the lips of educated people, who scoffed at Nanny's prejudices and superstitions, convincing stories about that which was familiar to me from my childhood: haunted houses, premonitions, the influence of the dead upon the living. How in haunted houses dishes and glasses floated about in the air. Knockings were heard at night. Someone's footsteps sounded, bringing chills to the spine. Policemen and frightened inhabitants were not the only ill-fated witnesses of these outrageous happenings. Entire streets, blocks, and even whole towns crowded around to stare at the mysterious events. Smart people, familiar with the phenomenon of mediums, attributed these appearances to the activity of playful spirits, ardent nihilists to pranksters, simple people of simple heart and faith to an unclean power. Thus the majority were in favor of spirits, and in my eyes this confirmed my childhood beliefs, which were destroyed by this same majority in the days of my youth, when I arrogantly scorned aloud simple people. At once the forgotten world of children's stories and the stories of Nanny was resurrected in my memory. But how much more complete was the unlearned world-view of my dear old Nanny, a world-view illuminated and made intelligible by the light of faith, than the chaos in which the educated and enlightened conducted their examinations of spirits and mediumistic spheres. My Nanny knew of such occurrences, and with her all the common Russian people, at a time when there was as yet no talk of psychic science, and these occurrences were attributed to the activity of the man-destroyer, God's arch-enemy and man-hater, the devil. They knew the purpose behind these occurrences, the destruction of God's creation, man's soul, and its eternal torment in that place prepared by Satan and his army. Just look, dear reader, at what the loss of this knowledge has cost humanity. Take a look around you, and if your soul isn't yet devoid altogether of the ability to respond to the activities of your contemporaries with grief at the loss of Christian faith, then you will understand that nothing could have benefited the evil one more than this, and that it is now he who is in reality the king of a depraved and possessed humanity. For long? Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knows that he hath but a short time. Revelation chapter 12, verse 12. From one of the elders of the great Optina Hermitage, God granted me to receive a manuscript which already in the days of the great Optina elder Ambrose of blessed memory was under his care and editing. The person from whom I obtained the manuscript assured me that it was destined by the elder himself to be printed for the edification of contemporaries, but for some reason it wasn't done. By God's unfathomable providence, it is only now, 15 years later, after the death of Elder Ambrose, that the time has come for it to be brought to light. Perhaps it will shed a little light on the darkness of the evils and distresses under which the Russian land now groans. Here it is, the manuscript, already yellowed with age. In a fine hand there is set forth the following. 1. Among simple people, one not infrequently hears stories such as might seem strange and even unbelievable. One such story, which we recorded from the words of an eyewitness, we offer to the reader. The extraordinary nature of the story makes it hard to believe, but neither can one completely dismiss it, because hundreds of people were eyewitnesses of the events we describe. We purposely indicate the place where this event took place and give the names of those persons who in whatever way were involved, in order that those who are curious and who have the opportunity can themselves verify what happened. The case we describe is not unique. He who is interested may hear similar stories among the common people, and if he listens to them carefully and without bias, he will find good reason to believe them.